Well, welcome back, everybody, to our annual Tech Talent Trends podcast. Many of you know a year ago, we dedicated an entire podcast to the state of technology talent. At that time, we could sense that we were hitting an inflection point from a talent hiring perspective. Fast forward another year, and things have changed dramatically, which is why I'm excited to shine the light on two of the top executive recruiters in the CIO and overall IT leadership space. No doubt, you know them both as they are considered best in class and top industry thought leaders. They're also a lot of fun. They like to banter. They're a little bit edgy, which makes them really, really fun and interesting. Shawn Banerji is the managing partner of the technology, digital, and data leaders practice for Caldwell Partners. Shawn guides clients seeking to navigate the convergence of talent and technology and its implications across all facets of the evolving digital enterprise. These efforts have resulted in the succession, selection, and recruitment of those catalyst leaders who reside at the intersection of commerce and technology. Martha Heller is also joining us. She is widely followed thought leader on technology leadership talent and is currently CEO of Heller Search, a premier executive search firm specializing in technology executive search. Over the course of her accomplished career, Martha has become an authoritative voice in executive search. She has recruited hundreds of CIOs, CTOs, architects, and other senior technology positions and become a trusted advisor to executives around the country. So, Martha, let's start with you. Welcome. And would you kick us off by providing your big picture perspectives on the state of the industry, or more specifically, the state of technology, talent, hiring, and so on?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that, Dan. I think we're in a world of perception versus reality right now. So the perception is that all the tech layoffs that we've seen from the big high-tech companies has wound up as a glut of talent in the market. So all you have to do as the CIO of a large enterprise is, walk downstairs, wave a checkbook, and all of the wonderful data engineers will just come filing it into your office. But of course, that is not the case. When we talk to CIOs about their challenges, hiring continues to be at the top of the list. And it's across the board. It's data engineers and security architects and enterprise architects, lots of need for architecture these days, Salesforce developers. So the demand for talent is still greater than the supply. That's at the CIO staff level. At the CIO level, CIO search likes change. When we are exiting a challenging economic cycle and we're entering into a world of innovation and digital investments, companies want a new CIO. When we're where we are now, which is companies recognizing that with inflation and interest rates, profits are not what we all wanted them to be. Now we need more cost management. And so we need a new CIO. Now, we all know that good CIOs should be able to thrive in times of investment and cost management. But often the impression they make on their executive committee is that they do one or the other. And so the market right now is very active for CIO, regardless of the economic cycle that we're in.
Fascinating. Shawn Banerji, welcome to you. And always great to collaborate, Shawn, and love to hear your thoughts on these big topics.
Look, I think Martha shared a very, balanced and accurate summation of what's happening in kind of the broader IT ecosystem. And, the fact that she's looking at it kind of at a full stack level is really beneficial. It's an interesting time. And, when people always say that, I said, well, is it interesting, good or bad? And I said, depends on your perspective. We have had a period of dramatic inflation in the IT talent pool for a number of years. We have seen some of the most significant percentage-wise wage inflation that, I have in my 30 years of being in search. And at the moment, we are seeing, kind of that pendulum swing back more towards a balanced approach where organizations are perhaps looking at cost optimization versus, as aggressively investing for innovation. Now, it doesn't mean that they don't continue to invest for innovation, because that is absolutely the case. But organizations that understand this shifting dynamic, what they're saying is, look, 18 months, 24 months ago, our IT investment dollar, whether it be for technology, resources, people, was maybe worth 85, 90 cents, 95 cents on that dollar. Well, we have an opportunity now, if we have both the courage and the capital to put it to work, to true up on that. So your investment dollar is now worth, close to $1, and in some cases, even more than $1. And we look at that as investing into the skid. So when the market's a little bit of a skid and the cost of things come down, so advertising, resources, the organizations that are putting their capital to work are not only finding that they're gaining better value in the moment, but when the market invariably returns, they're that much ahead of their competitors who are chasing.
And the irony is that technology investment is a key to cost management. All of those companies that want to use AI, for example, for productivity gains, have a beautiful cost management tool on their hands, but not if their infrastructure is so messy and legacy that they can't get any benefit out of that investment. So that's where the irony is. In order to have the cost management and productivity gains from technology, you need to invest in new technology. So I think companies are sort of caught. To get the cost management, they need to invest in the technology.
I think it's an unprecedented time right now if you have the will and the resources to be able to attract talent that, perhaps, would have ignored you or was unaffordable in the not too distant past.
And if you as an executive committee have the digital literacy and foresight to understand how the impact of all of this technology investing is going to impact your company long term. I find that the brilliant technology resources, they want to go into a company where not only is there exciting technology to work on, but they're connected to the mission, they're connected to the outcome, they believe in the company. And companies that have not as of yet defined where they're going through technology will have a harder time recruiting those folks.
So good. I mean, well, I appreciate you both so much. And, Shawn used that word interesting, right? These are interesting times. And I had a CIO once tell me, though, he said, interesting is always a euphemism for something else, which is fascinating, right? And you're both word people, so you appreciate that. But I have a question for both of you. I reached out to a number of the CIOs, CxOs who were our top podcast guests of 2023. And I want to get their questions about the state of technology talent, what's going on out there. So the first one comes from Avi Dar, who notes the overarching question is around the nature of work. Okay, so he asked, what is the realistic mix of in-office work versus remote work that will become the new normal? There is currently a mismatch in expectations between management and the workforce. Who will win? Interesting question. So let me hear from both of you. Just someone jump in.
I believe the workforce will win, because I think imposing archaic management principles on a new workforce is a losing proposition. That being said, the companies that know they need an in-person culture, one, they're going to be competing with all of those businesses that aren't requiring relocation. But the other is, if they're going to insist on an in-person culture, they have to make it worthwhile. They have to make the time in the office meaningful, again, to the mission or to the culture or to the ability to build relationships. But if it's same old cubicle culture, and now I've got to commute in, I moved away, now I've got to figure out, am I going to move back? I'm going to go to a company that isn't requiring that. Now, we'll all look back here. Let's all meet here in 10 years and see what has the impact of all of this remote work had on relationships, loyalty, tenure, leadership, innovation. We'll all find out. But when we do a search and the demand is in person every day, we fill the search. It takes a lot longer, and you don't necessarily get the best technology talent in the market. I'll just say one more thing on this. If you decide we're not going to do an in-person, we're going to do remote, you can't just build a digital twin of your culture, because the culture that you developed was dependent on an in-person culture, from the before times. So CIOs would be advised to be, movers and shakers in the creation of a new culture that works for us in this more remote hybrid work that we're in.
So, Shawn, the workforce going to win out. What do you think?
I think ultimately, that will be the case. But let me perhaps take a step back to bring us forward, right? So historically, CIOs, certainly in mid-market and kind of Fortune class global enterprises, were pioneers in multi-site management or multi-site leadership, right? Their organizations inherently, certainly you may have had critical mass at headquarters or wherever, but you had, CIOs who were dealing with different teams in different locations. You saw, with the advent of global resourcing, working with vendor partners who, needed to be, seamlessly integrated into your IT operations. It may have been in South America, Asia, Europe, wherever it might be. So CIOs really had a leg up on this and were pioneers in multi-site global management. I'm going to use the term management and leadership for the moment as the same, because I don't necessarily think they're the same thing. And a lot of that was proved out during COVID back in 2019. And I think there was a tremendous fear on the part of many organizations and individuals and investors, certainly, that, boy, as the world kind of quote unquote went, remote overnight, that there's going to be tons of, operational slowdown and in some cases, fractures that would potentially bring kind of the wheels of commerce to a halt. And it was virtually seamless. We saw very little actual business interruption, business continuity disruption. Most organizations kind of, were able to, support their, non-IT staff who moved into the home because essentially they were just using the same playbook by and large that they had working with the IT organization for so long. Bringing us to today, that cat is out of the bag, right? So people's behaviors and expectations have been modified and changed. And the operating model itself has been proven that you can, in fact, run a large, complex global enterprise in a remote fashion. Now, do you miss out on, certain elements of esprit de corps, mentorship, leadership, development, training, collaboration? You do in a purely hybrid model. But I think Martha, makes a great point in that you have to adapt your culture to that operating world, to that digital hybrid model. And I do think that some of this is based on I'm not sure the using this word, an older workforce has seen this work and they don't want to go back. And you have a younger workforce, particularly millennials, who have known nothing but this. But I do think that there is a honest dialogue that needs to take place, which says, there are certain skills and opportunities that are only gained from being physically present with each other. And should you choose to opt out of that, you need to understand the potential consequence. So I think that transparency, that authenticity of leadership, encouraged to have those conversations and recognize that, we are going to be working in a world that, invariably has on-site, remote, and hybrid. But people need to take ownership for their own decisions and then, share in the accountability of those outcomes.
I was talking to Fletcher Previn, the CIO of Cisco, about this very topic. And he gave me a nice metaphor that think of work relationships as a bank. When you meet at the water cooler and you grab a cup of coffee and how was your weekend, you're making deposits in that relationship bank. Most Zoom meetings are, let's get down to business. Who's got the agenda? Are we done? We're out. Get that to me by 3:00 this afternoon. You're making withdrawals. Remote work is mostly withdrawals without a lot of deposits. So if we're going to live in a hybrid world or a fully remote world, we need to figure out digitally how to make deposits. And I will say one more thing on this. I've always found it so ironic that the CIO role, which ultimately, yes, it's leadership, it's people, but there's technology in there somewhere, right? CIOs know technology. the IT department, you always thought of like IT has a culture and then the rest of the business has a culture. And yet who is taking a leadership role in defining this new world that we're living in its CIOs? So I know we're going to talk about all the different skill sets of CIOs, but we're adding another to the already considerable list, which is culture definer, culture tastemaker. Who would have thought that the most technical would be driving the most human of decisions?
That's a great segue, Martha. I want to ask Shawn a question. So John Hill, Dr. John Hill, got his doctorate earlier this year, somehow figured that out, got it done. But John Hill provides some fascinating color commentary as to what is expected of a CIO today. And John said CEOs are looking for a technologist. So the CEO is looking for a technologist who is a disruptive innovator, can drive transformation of the business, has excellent business and financial acumen, is a great leader, is an exceptional communicator, influencer, is strategic, and can ensure that operations run flawlessly.
And redheaded and left-handed.
How hard can this be, Shawn, right? Then, he goes on, then the CEO must execute in an era of rapid technology evolution, expectations of faster time to market, an unbelievable cyber threat landscape, a complex network of solutions in various clouds, data privacy regulations, escalating technology costs, an insufficient level of talent entering the marketplace. So, not for the faint of heart. His question is, what will it take to be a CIO in the future, or a similar title, and are we really doing the right things to develop a deep enough pool of candidates that meet the qualifications? Amazing question, John.
Yeah, I mean, so I've known John for a long time, and he is, I think, a great example of someone who has demonstrated the evolution of the role. I mean, he's really lived it. My comment or reaction, I think, to that statement is the CIO role, or one of any kind of meaningful consequence, has always been and always will be bigger than any one individual. There is simply no way for any one human being, in my experience, to sustainably over time perform all of these tasks and meet all of these mandates at a high level of proficiency without something going awry or having their constitution give out, right? I mean, these jobs, what you have described is, someone who can be everything to everybody all of the time. And I think we all know that's really a recipe for disaster. But John's comment around developing others, that's I have never met a leader, a CEO, a CFO, a CIO, anyone, CHRO, who was a top performer that had not built an incredibly talented cadre of leaders around them. Historically, that's one of the reasons we saw team moves, right? You saw individuals kind of, move from one role to another, and there was this fantastic followership that went along with it, because there was a recognition that these roles were bigger than any one person. And there's a direct correlation, and we'll talk about some of the things later in the podcast, I'm sure, between the performance of the individual CIO and the performance of the organization, which also is another measure that we, spend a lot of time on. But we have got to continue to invest in people. And we also have to recognize that, sometimes, there are individuals who are going to be fantastic at doing certain things who, for whatever reason, don't have the proclivity, the ambition, the desire to take on, another, say, a CIO role. Others will. And being able to recognize that and take a purpose-built approach to developing those people is such an important part of this kind of leadership calculus that John's referencing.
I wonder also, Shawn and Dan, whether, as we become a business technology enterprise, right? Every company is seeing software and data play a more central role in their products and services. When do CIOs get out of the mode of delivering technology unto their business partners who receive it? And when do they design and govern an environment by which business partners can do a little more self-service, citizen development, citizen creation, self-service data and analytics. If technology is your business, so you're loading all of these skills into your technology department, whether it's to the CIO or the wonderful talent he or she creates, when is it incumbent on business units to start developing technology resources of their own? As we shift, we've been an agrarian country for years, hundreds of years. Then we became an industrial company. That's when we set all this up. We're not an industrial economy anymore. We're a digital or even a data economy. And so the notion that tech does tech and everybody else does business, that cannot stand. So I think seeing some distributed technology leadership into some of the other functions. Now, that can be a scary, gnarly way to go where we wind up with a lot of spaghetti architecture. But to have every technology-related responsibility fall on the shoulders of an IT department, we cannot continue in that direction, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think, Martha, you're talking in some respects a little bit of a back to the future, right? And we see these cycles. We've been doing this long enough. You see it. I mean, there was once a time where the enterprise or group CIO's office, ostensibly was the top function within the IT ecosystem of a multi-business line or multi-geography enterprise. But the truth was, the real action, the sexy stuff, the commercial stuff was happening in the business units and their individual, CIOs or whatever the designation might have been, and their, corresponding teams that were working in lockstep with their business stakeholders. And in fact, we saw in certain, financial services industries as trading and other functions went, fully electronic. We found that there were, people who had historically or had started out badged IT, they became the business because they had greater proficiency with the systems and protocols around trading than some of the traditional traders did.
Right. That's right. It's back and forth. And in the end, it's architecture and governance.
Martha, a little while ago, you made reference to culture building, talent building, and one of the best out there at that is our friend at Oshkosh Corporation, Anu Kare. And Anu has a great question around what he calls the rebirth of CIO. So he asked, 5 years back, there was a trend to hire a separate person in the chief digital officer role, and now the role has emerged as CDIO, Chief Information and Digital Officer. Is this a rebirth of the CIO role? How are CIOs performing in their new avatar of CDIO?
Well, first, I'd have to tell you about a great acronym I heard the other day, which is CIDIOT, which is Chief Information, Digital, Innovation, Operations, and Technology.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
We haven't recruited a CIDIOT just yet. It's funny because I'll just tell you a story that is indicative of what I'm seeing happening around boards and the ELT. We were kicking off a search for a large global equipment maker. And the person leaving, who we were backfilling, was a CIO, and they loved him. So, you get one of those clone the outgoing person, except a little more of this and a little less of this. And so it was ERP and information security, and certainly tiring a digital thread through order to cash. So it was digital. And so we wrote a position description. We sent it to the CEO, and he came back and said, looks great. One minor change, the board wants to call this a CTO. So I said, okay, CTO is not a CIO. They are different roles. And so we pushed back, and the board said, we like the CTO role because it's sexier. Now, I don't know how often boards use the word sexier, but in this case, they did. And so I wrote a whole talking points for the board about what's a CTO, what's a CIO, what's a chief digital officer. So this took a whole back and forth cycle, which we wouldn't have done, say, 2 years ago. In the end, we settled for Chief Digital Information Technology Officer. That's what we went with. But here's what I think will happen and hope will happen. We are living in a digital world. There will be the point where digital goes away. We don't have a chief oxygen officer. I believe digital now connotes change. But once we all acknowledge that we've gotten there, we'll lose that title. And I think we're going to be back to CIO. So the two models that I see are, we have a CIO and he or she is great at implementation. But in terms of innovation and really thinking about where we're going from a digital perspective, we're going to fly in somebody who was a digital business leader, or maybe an e-commerce executive, or maybe somebody from marketing. They're going to have a digital strategy, which is a technology strategy, but we already have a technology strategy. Oops, now we have two. So the more effective chief digital officer route, I believe, is a CIO who can prove his or her implementation, can lean in to products in the market, to culture, to digital transformation, and become the chief digital officer. I predict, again, what's great about predicting is nobody ever checks back to see if you were right or not, but I predict that we will lose this title digital soon enough and we'll have our CIO back.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting, Dan, for sure. Again, that word interesting. There's a great movie. It's a Ridley Scott movie. It's called Kingdom of Heaven, and I'd highly recommend people watching it. It kind of takes place in the times of the Crusade. Fantastic cast, and there's a scene near the end where one of the protagonists, who is a crusading knight named Balian, asks the Saracen leader, Saladin. He says, what is Jerusalem, worth? And the guy kind of looks at him and takes a step back and he says, it's worth nothing and it's worth everything. And it's kind of the same with titles. Titles are worth nothing and they're worth everything. And depending upon the organization, the industry, the content of the role, and the desired outcomes, they are incredibly important. At the same time, though, I encourage people to look beyond the actual title itself and look at those other, pieces that I referenced: content, mandate, reporting structure, right? What is it intended to do? And what we encourage our clients is to align and designate a title that most genuinely reflects those other pieces of the equation. We constantly are in the market, and, very often, you have to every time you have to educate the candidate, the prospect, around, what is the role, right? It's a CTO, it's a CDO, it's a CIO, chief innovation. All these have different, flavors within kind of this couture of different titles. And you have to take it on a case-by-case basis. And I could see this coming full circle at some point. I mean, that absolutely, could be the case. But I'm finding just in the conversations we're having with, private equity investors and, boards, that they remain, in a conundrum. And part of where, folks like Martha and I bring assistance is, providing them with the guideposts to understand what is it that you're ultimately looking to achieve. And let's craft a role and title that is going to give you the best opportunity of getting that person who will help you get to that journey.
Yeah, what's the joke, Shawn? If you've read one CIO job description, you've read one CIO job description, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, here's the thing. I have not seen any see idiot, but there used to be this is how far we've come. There used to be the old saying, CIO is good for career is over. And
Exactly.
that couldn't be farther from the truth today.
That's right.
Right. Here's a topic that you kind of touched on earlier. I'll have you both talk this. Maybe you can go first, Martha. But Anita Klopfenstein from Little Caesars, amazing leader. She asked, from an executive search perspective, what skills are companies looking for at the executive level? What is the most critical skill set? Has there been a shift in the desired skill set over time?
I mean, what I'd say for CEOs, what they're looking for is transformation. They're looking for innovation. They're looking for operational excellence. It's all the things they've always been looking for. But what I would say is the CIOs who come in and are effective bring something additional to all of those skills that we've been enumerating throughout this conversation, and that is digital literacy. You know, we've been saying for a long time that CIOs need to know the business as well as every business leader. And yet they also have to have depth in technology. But leave those acronyms at the door, right? Use your business voice in business meetings and use your tech voice with the team. We've been saying that for a long time. When does it become incumbent upon board members and other ELT members to know a thing or two about APIs and IoT and a composable architecture and analytics and AI? So, for example, a CEO might say, hey, I want AI, but I don't want to clean up my enterprise data because I don't want to spend that money. Well, there's a conflict there between getting benefit out of AI and not cleaning up your enterprise data. When does when does a technology savvy CFO understand that cloud FinOps is a thing? When does a digitally savvy CHRO understand that designing a workforce for the need that we're all going to have for data scientists become his or her most important job? So we focus so much that the CIO needs to get digitally savvy and business savvy. The rest of the executive committee needs to know a thing or two about technology. In fact, one question I ask every CIO, it's my favorite question. I say, if you could wave a magic wand over all your key stakeholders so that they wake up tomorrow morning just accepting something about complexity or governance or TCO or timing or anything, what would it be? And the list is long. And they always say, can I have 2 magic wands? I say, you can have as many as you want. So, I believe that I've never seen digital literacy on a position description, but it is an increasing requirement of CIOs, whether it's on the PD or not.
Great, thanks, Shawn. How would you respond to Anita?
Yeah, I think fortunately we've seen an evolution, and there was a time, I'm going to date this statement because CEOs often don't fly commercial anymore. They probably have their own corporate jet. But back when they did, kind of the running joke among CIOs, if you're to get enough of them together, was kind of their greatest enemy was the seat back magazine.
Exactly.
And it was hey, I my CEO came to talk to me about this, and he had read about whatever in the back of the American Airlines seatback magazine, the United States seatback magazine, and that there was in jest, of course, but there was some validity to that. And IT in general was an enigma to people who worked outside of the function. And I saw any number of CIOs effectively manipulate that to their advantage because they had stakeholders who, didn't even pretend to have any sense of what IT was or did. And it allowed the CIO to have a very free hand in how he or she, operated. There's the old, Sims, right? Cy Sims. And he would always say, our best customer is an educated customer. And that's happened now. And it's, the course of, a couple decades. And I think it's accelerated more recently. But we have seen a higher level of technical fluency, not necessarily people who are technical, but technical fluency within other stakeholder functions, whether it's finance, operations, supply chain, HR, et cetera. And organizations that have that digital fluency kind of embedded in their leadership culture and ideally across, top down in their organization, absolutely outperform those organizations that, remain bifurcated or operating in a world where, it's a Tower of Babel. Your CIO should be able to have an informed dialogue with your head of supply chain, right? There isn't a protocol, a function, a workflow, a business process that exists in virtually any modern enterprise that technology doesn't touch or enable. So in certain ways, the CIO has a real leg up in terms of, speaking the other functional languages and the language of the business. And as other stakeholders, increase their fluency. And we do see that happening as Martha said, that kind of that digital awareness, that digital fluency. I mean, that is something that, hopefully will continue to accelerate.
Martha, one of the things I always recommend to people is the Heller Report. It comes out every Thursday morning religiously. It's a great resource. So if you haven't signed up, go subscribe to it. I look forward to it every week. But you recently had one of our other top podcast guests, Unisys CTO, Dwayne Allen. And he wrote an article for your publication titled Reorienting the Enterprise to Take Advantage of Gen AI. So you've been in this business a long time. You've seen these technologies come and go. What's your take on all this right now?
I have to say, Dan, I had a existential moment a couple of weeks ago where I thought, is it time for me to retire? Can I sit this AI one out? But then I got energized and now I'm going into it headlong. So yes, everybody is writing about AI, talking about AI. Here's what I think is going to happen, which again is a little ironic. I think what's going to happen is everybody's going to want to do AI again. Shawn, I used to write for one of those airline magazines, by the way, Shawn. So you're welcome to all those CIOs out there. But I think what's going to happen is we can run fit for purpose AI tools. We can have AI write our marketing collateral for better or for worse. We can have AI do these spot things. But until we have an enterprise data strategy with enterprise data, either in a data warehouse, in a data lake, whatever it is, AI tools will be just surface. They will never become a part of the habit or the processes of our business. So let's just talk about data for a second. When I ask CIOs, here's the arc. Data everywhere, but not a drop of value. Data in systems, data in acquisitions, data in regions, but it's not all together. Okay, once we've got our data together, now we need governance. What is a product? Who owns this data? Well, again, here we have CIOs making decisions that ultimately are business decisions and are even political. Master data management is political. So now we've got some governance. Great. Now we need, again, literacy. You're sending me all this data. I don't know what to do with it. And once we get over that hump, now we have monetization or value or data as an asset. If you ask most CIOs of large enterprise companies that are not in high tech and that have grown through acquisition, they're at data everywhere and not a drop of value. So I think all the AI, we're going to need, MLL developers and prompt engineers. Sure, we'll need all of that. I think we're going to need data stewards, traditional data engineers who can actually get our data into shape. So you basically have, all right, we want AI. Great. Well, what's our overall data strategy? To know that, we need to know our overall corporate or business strategy. Do we really have that? So I think all this AI is going to turn and point to some of the gaps in corporate strategy and the gaps in data strategy, data management, and data infrastructure that are the reality. ChatGPT can write, I'd love if ChatGPT would write my health report, by the way. I'm not there yet. But I think it's a far cry between these special purpose tools and true AI transformation at the enterprise level.
Shawn, I definitely want to get you in on this topic. And Anita Kloffenstein had a question related to what Martha just shared. She said, with the explosion of AI, there appears to be new job titles in the market: natural language processing engineers, language model trainers, prompt engineers. Are these titles here to stay, or they seem trendy for now? So take a big picture wherever you want, but also around the new roles.
Sure. So our personal, belief here, I'll speak for myself, but I think I can, for my firm and a number of my colleagues, what we're seeing right now with, ChatGPT and a lot of the excitement around AI is to some extent, a industry and a vendor community which is looking to monetize something that has, in fact, been around for some time and is perhaps still not quite as ready for prime time as, some of the vendors might like buyers and influence to believe. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Vector Institute in Toronto. So the Vector Institute is one of, if not the leading AI ML research institute in the world. And we've done some work for them. We're involved in a really unique pilot with them around how AI and ML can be incorporated into talent and hiring. And there's a gentleman there, his name is Jeffrey Hinton. And Jeffrey Hinton is a PhD in artificial intelligence. He was running something called the Neuro Computation and Adaptive Perception Program at the University of Toronto. This was, funded by the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research. And he had his own neural network startup called DNN Research, which kind of was spawned from that work at the University of Toronto. And Google actually acquired that company in 2013, and it has served as really the foundation for Google's AI and ML deep learning programs. Take a guess when Jeffrey Hinton earned his PhD in artificial intelligence. And I'm not even going to ask you, Dan or Martha, what year. You just give me the decade.
70s.
No,
Correct.
say 90s.
1978.
Wow.
Okay. So there's a PhD in artificial intelligence in 1978 that was earned at the University of Edinburgh, right? So this wasn't, if you want to think that, Silicon Valley is the epicenter or that, this is all new, that's simply not the case. The research, the heavy lifting that's been invested in this field has been going on for decades. There's an incredible book about the emergence of Silicon Valley and the parallel of the microchip called Chip Wars, which I'd also say is required reading. And what you learn is that these things have been happening. There's been a cadence and a pace to innovation as far as neural networks and AI and ML is concerned. But we reached a inflection point, and I think some of this was economically motivated, where we saw certain technology emerge. It immediately kind of came into the hands of consumers versus a commercial or professional customer base, which and today with social media, it spread like wildfire. And companies looked at that and said, "Hey, we've got a fantastic opportunity to monetize this phenomenon." So I think that, we're in a period now where we are still early days. If we're on a journey, the ship is still, we can look back and still see land. But to your specific question about these titles, these are, these titles will remain. They will evolve and morph over time. But this is a field that will be, a central catalyst for, how business is conducted and how, human beings go about living their lives, whether we like it or not. I certainly don't have the hubris to pretend I have any kind of monopoly on, let alone the right answers or even commenting on it beyond as an observer. I'm fascinated. I'm a believer. But I am not sure in what time frame we're going to actually see the application pay off in a real world measurable manner for us.
And Shawn, I agree with everything you say there. And what I would add, look, insurance companies have been running AI for claims processing for years and years and years. But now it's in the public consciousness. Now it's in the hands of consumers. So, what I think will be very interesting going forward is, well, let me say it this way. Way back in the day when I was at CIO Magazine, I had a column called Sound Off. And this was back when the internet was just coming around. And the dean of a Ivy League divinity school had pornography on his computer. And so the IT folks came in, and then they had to deal with, what are we going to do about this? So what was so interesting about that was, because now you've got all this privacy and access issues coming in from the internet, IT is put in a position of, having to make some ethical choices, which seemed odd to me. So I sort of raised that as a discussion. That's where we're headed with AI. The ethical discussion about AI and when does everything's been technology for technology's sake, or rather technology innovation at all costs. Yes, we pay attention to information security because we know that that can be a challenge, but we haven't really thought a lot about the ethical implications of the internet, the ethical implications of doing everything on your phone. Now ask a parent of a young person, and they might say there are a lot of ethical implications to the fact that children live digital lives now. But I think what we're going to see, which I think has been absent from a discussion of technology innovation for a very long time, is what are the ethics behind, when the robots rule the world.
Oh, Martha, you know, no truer words, right? I mean, with the deep fake technology that's now proliferating, and I remember, seeing the Terminator movie in the theater and thinking, Skynet, boy, what a crazy world. Well, we've got drones, we've got, ubiquitous, Wi-Fi and connectivity. I mean, we're not that far off from, in fact, we may even have surpassed what was considered science fiction within our own lifetime, right?
That's right. And we have a technocracy. And I believe that I coined that word, Dan. Try to give me credit on that one. Where we have a technocracy where who is making the decisions about how the role technology plays in our lives. These are not necessarily people trained in ethics or even in the humanities. These are coders who are making decisions about how we humans should be living our lives. So here comes another word, another apt use of the word interesting.
Well, I'm gonna take us out here with 2 rounds of kind of the lightning round questions. Something I learned from you, Martha, years ago at a panel you led, and so
and Dan, I learned it from Mary Fran Johnson.
Oh, there we go. We all love Mary Fran. So people are realizing that you are both incredible communicators. You're very articulate. You both have advanced degrees in communication and literature. And so you know that words matter, how you communicate a message matters. So I want to give you 3 options to speak to, okay? So if I'm a candidate, and I'll have you go first, Shawn, and you go second, Martha. Just pick one that you want. So if I'm a candidate, how do I best tell the story around one of these scenarios? I've been on the bench for a long time. I've been fired. I've had a couple of short stints. So Shawn, pick any one you want, and then Martha, you can take another one.
Oh, gosh, these are all great, Dan. And in some ways, I mean, I'd have the same, answer to all of them, the same counsel, I suppose, which is, you've got to own it, right? You've got to be accountable and authentic. I think, we talk about, a lot of folks have been, fired, let go, whatever whatever the euphemism, the way we want to describe it. People have been on the bench for periods of time. It's so personal. And, what you've got to be able to do is transcend a macro perception of, well, the person got fired, so they must be incompetent, or there was an event, or they're on the bench, must mean they can't get a job. There must be something wrong with them, or they've had a couple short stints, something must have gone awry. And I think what really is first and foremost is an exercise in self-reflection and honesty, and being able to say what really happened in these circumstances. Because I'll be just very clinical about it. When you're working with, myself or Martha, one of our colleagues who operate at this level, we have our own reputation to selfishly take into consideration. And sometimes we'll know even before we ask the question what the answer is, and it's a test. What happened or what transpired, or we're going to find out, right? My clients, investors, public companies, the level of rigor that's applied in doing diligence around candidates is exceptionally high. And it's not just, hey, here are the friends, brothers, relatives, references. It's talking to people off the record, understanding precisely what went down, When we do references, we're not fishing for negatives or fishing for positives. We're fishing for insight. We want to understand what happened, what the circumstances were, good, bad, or indifferent, so that then we can make informed decisions around, is this the right fit? Because victory isn't one when the person walks, accepts an offer, walks in the door. It's how they perform in that role over time. Do they deliver against the desired outcomes? So, we need, and, hey, if you were in a job for 18 months and you delivered against the outcomes, fantastic. I mean, there's a great narrative to be told there. But I think in all these cases, you need to be able to own it. Almost nothing is unforgivable within reason. There is, in the words of, our retired colleague, Mark Polanski, there's a job for everyone. And you just have to be able to go through this again in a very clinical, transparent, authentic fashion, and share that with the recruiter. And the recruiter, will tell you, look, these circumstances aren't going to work for you. In fact, none of these may work. Here is where you need to spend your time in order to create the career or job outcome that you're looking for.
I think that's hard to add to, Shawn, because you were so comprehensive. But I would say, we just had a situation with a candidate who was not forthcoming about his reasons for departure. And the reason he was not put forward wasn't the reasons for his departure, it was the fact that he wasn't forthcoming about it. Integrity is a leadership quality we all have always wanted and continue to want. So I agree. Transparent, but you don't have to do a whole soliloquy about, the injustices and what all happened. So hit it, nip it in the bud, get it right out on the table. But if it was a firing, what did you learn from it? How are you a better leader from that? So showing the way you're taking these experiences and bringing them, into your own leadership, your understanding of yourself as a leader, I think that can put a little cherry on top. And the other thing I would say is if you find that your last 3 roles you were fired, you might want to do some self-introspection about the roles you're choosing or the way that you're approaching those roles. And this is like, as we've been saying this forever, it still holds true. Have your relationships, have your networks. No, because it's true, Shawn, the back channels, the referencing, especially, for example, with private equity, they know everybody. They will find out everything. So make sure that your colleagues and the people you were working with are supportive of you and understand the circumstances so that you're not boxed out. And then the only thing I would say on the jumpy, having a jumpy resume is sometimes appearances are jumpier than they really are. If the company kept getting acquired and changing names and you stayed with it, make sure you're showing an umbrella date. Jumpiness can be the death knell of a resume. So make sure your resume isn't indicating a jumpiness that's not there.
So good. Yeah, such good advice. Last round, again, I'll give you 3 scenarios, and Martha, you can go first this time. Some CIOs won't consider a role unless it reports to the CEO. So how critical is it that the CIO report to the CEO? Also, what's a reputation you don't want with executive recruiters?
So I guess I'll start with the last one first. You do not want a reputation as a job hopper, to go back to the previous. You don't want a reputation as commanding control and somebody who's very hard on their team. That's an old style, servant leadership is more the norm today. And then in terms of reporting structure, the worst answer you could ever give is it depends, but it does. If this is a back office turnaround and everything is about financial management, and this is you're shaping something up for sale, who cares? Report to the CFO, report to the COO, whatever. But if this is about digital transformation and changing the business that we're in, and digital literacy and technology has moved to the center of everything that we do, then I do believe a CEO reporting structure is important. And by the way, it's going to be interesting for CEOs in the next X years to look around the executive committee and, that's a chief data officer. What do they do? That's a chief AI officer. I have one of those. There's a CIO. What do they do? And we've got a chief digital officer. And our COO used to be a CIO. I'm seeing a lot of that. A lot of CIOs become COOs. So I think as the executive committee is populated with these kind of quasi-technology leaders, then the CIO down, in the second chair is not going to deliver the IT value that companies expect from their investment. I believe CEO reporting structure is important when technology is taking center stage in growth.
Yeah, and look, I think Martha summed it up very well. I mean, historically, there was a bifurcation, right? If it reported to the CFO, you must be managing for cost. If it reported to the CEO, it was a strategic role. If it reported to someone else, then it was TBD. And, again, what we try to go back to is what's the content of the role and what are the desired outcomes? And let's set that person up to be successful based on those desired outcomes. Here's the thing, regardless of whether it reports to the CEO, CFO, or someone else, the role itself, unless it is a purely back office position at this point, which, we don't really do those searches, there needs to be an open access leadership or management construct in place where the CIO needs to be able to have the ear of the CEO, even the board, or whomever is appropriate, without kind of the blockage that kind of legacy hierarchical organizational constructs would likely dictate.
Great stuff. Well, I'm gonna wind us out here. Martha, Shawn, I want to have you give us one more thing. We're sitting here a year from now. We're doing this podcast again, and 2024 just happened. What's the headline? What's the one sentence headline for 2024 from a whole talent search perspective, the state of talent? What do you think it'll be? Or maybe even a word. Will it be interesting, Shawn?
It'll certainly be interesting. But I think that, we live in just such fascinating, exciting times, and the pace of change is, it's really unprecedented. There are moonshots going on all over the place. And I think that, those people that are able to listen and really hear will stand to gain the most in this coming year.
For me, I would say the headline is AI opens up new security challenges for businesses. That I think will be one. AI investment falls short of returns, of corporate returns, I think will be another. And I think a final headline will be wanted data engineers, data architects, AI developers, and we don't have enough of them.
Well, I'm not going to hold you to it. I'm not going to play it back next year, but I love your perspectives. You two are always so interesting. Appreciate you both taking the time. I know you don't do a lot of these things because you're so busy, but, we covered a lot of territory in the podcast, and everyone knows to look forward to next week. Follow CIO.com, and we'll have a blog post with additional content from Martha and Shawn. And, with that, thanks to you both for all you do for our profession. Again, your thought leadership, your brilliance, your edgy, your timely, your fun, and we're just fortunate to have you in our profession. So thank you both very much.
Yeah, and I'd like you to play that back next year. I like that list of attributes. I'd like to hear that one again.
I'd like you to package that and send that to my CEO, my wife, my kids,
my children.
Yeah, exactly. Martha, great seeing you. Thank you so much, Dan. Always a pleasure. Happy holidays. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Tech Whisperers, inside the playbook of the best digital leaders, a Woolette and Associates podcast. Keep connected with us by subscribing to the show in your favorite podcast player. If you like what you've heard, please rate the show, as this helps us connect the world's best digital leaders with those who aspire to learn, grow, and thrive in this amazing profession. Thanks for listening. Until next time.